Captain Alvin Thurick stood alone on the observation platform, the vast expanse of the Draxian Nebula painting streaks of violet and teal across the viewport. Around him, the silent hull of the Ithraxian Eclipser felt impossibly large. Its mission of deep space exploration rendered moot by a catastrophic systems failure. The nacelles that once whispered with the promise of faster-than-light travel now lay cold, their familiar hum replaced by a dissonant chorus of warning lights. He drew a steady breath, the faint scent of ionized ozone pricking his nostrils. Behind him, the bridge's emergency luminescence cast elongated shadows across the crew's anxious faces. 3 lines of bioluminescent circuitry traced their way down each Ithraxian engineer's arms, pulsing rapidly with erratic energy readings. Diagnostics. Still inconclusive? Alvin asked, his voice calm but edged with barely contained urgency. Lieutenant Virakel approached, her sapphire skin dimming in deference. We've run the full array of quantum harmonic scans, multiple resonance simulations, even reconfigured the conduits based on the Eon archives, but the secondary flux bus refuses to stabilize. The warp core's throttled at 20%, collapsing any attempt to reroute power. A low hum of collective frustration rippled through the bridge. Repair protocols designed to handle improbable contingencies offered no solution. This failure lay outside the scope of even Ithraxian ingenuity. At that moment, the airlock cycled open behind them. Commander Elaine Marlowe stepped into the bridge, her human silhouette sharp against the soft glow of the nebula. She wore her signature utility suit scuffed at the knees and stained with oil from her last outpost salvage. A familiar grin crossed her face as she took in the scene. "Same as always," she said, voice bright and unassuming. "Ships dead in the water, crews on edge, captains looking to tear out his hair." She stowed her scanner briefly and circled the console, peering over readouts. "Mind if I take a look?" Virakel hesitated, then gestured. "By all means. But I must warn you, our systems use multidimensional busing arrays. Human engineers rarely work outside our unified collective." Elaine nodded, eyes sparkling, with unfazed confidence. "I've tangled with gravitational feed loops and tachyonic feedback traps. Let me see what you have." She ducked under the console's protruding panels, unplugged the translucent ribbon of quantum fiber, and connected her handheld tricorder. The device chirped, its display flickering through layers of exotic energy signatures. Elaine murmured softly, translating the Ithraxian runes on the readout as though reciting an incantation. "Here it is," she said after a moment. "See this junction?" She tapped a point where 2 conduits merged in a shimmering node. "The quantum phase is out of sync by precisely 0.02 exaseconds. That's small, almost imperceptible, but in your warp matrix, that offset causes a destructive interference loop. Everything downstream starves for power." Alvin exchanged a glance with Virakel. "What do you propose?" he asked. Elaine stood and produced a slender coil of copper alloy wire from her tool belt. The Ithraxians regarded it in stunned silence. "This," she said, holding it up. "I need to bridge the phase node with a conductor that can tolerate variable flux without phase shifting itself. Earth-grade copper alloy works surprisingly well in a pinch, so long as you strip it down to its pure crystalline form and insulate it against quantum bleed." The chamber felt suddenly charged with possibility. The chief engineer, an elder Ithraxian named Trax, stepped forward. His skin rippled with bioluminescent patterns, a sign of intense emotion in Ithraxian culture. "You would repair our ship with a single wire?" he whispered. Elaine's grin widened. "One wire, one human stubbornness. Let me show you." As the crew formed a hesitant circle around her, the Eclipser drifted in serene stasis. In that moment, hope flickered, not born from protocol or ancient wisdom, but from an outsider's unorthodox ingenuity. And somewhere deep within the labyrinth of alien circuitry, the tiniest spark of resolution began to glow. The hollow expanse of the Ithraxian High Council chamber shivered with unease as Chancellor Varoken's luminescent form drifted to the podium. Massive crystalline pillars framed him, their surfaces alive with pulsing light. Around the circular base sat the 8 members of the Star Council, each more ancient and inscrutable than the last. "We stand at the precipice of shame," Varoken intoned, his voice echoing against the polished walls. "Our prized exploration vessel, the Eclipser, has fallen silent. And now you call upon a human and outsider to restore what our greatest minds have failed to repair." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. In Ithraxian culture, reliance on alien aid was tantamount to admitting weakness. Yet the data all pointed to one truth. Only the singular human, Elaine Marlowe, had detected the fault. Council of the Earth, his bioluminescent veins flickering red, leaned forward. "We have access to the Eon archives, millennia of technical lore. No Ithraxian engineer has ever encountered an irreparable ship. Do we truly believe an Earthling's primitive metallurgy can solve our quantum phase matrix?" Varoken's eyes blazed. "Our traditions do not bind us when survival is at stake." He turned his gaze upon the solitary observer in the gallery. Elaine, seated on a low bench, her posture relaxed, though her pulse coordinates registered high. "Command her presence." A silent order passed through the chamber. Elaine rose and stepped into the council circle. Her boots made no sound on the crystalline floor. She bowed slightly, an unorthodox gesture that drew puzzled glances. "You have questioned my methods," she said evenly, "but no one has disputed the readings. You've tried every known protocol, every simulation, yet the core's feedback loop grows more unstable. I propose we stop just for a moment and see what we haven't tried." Councillor Girol, the eldest member, tilted his head. "You speak of untried methods, human. But do you comprehend the dangers? A single miscalculation in the warp conduit could trigger a cascade, an overload that would evaporate this vessel on the spot." Elaine nodded. "I understand your caution, but I've worked on generators with a millionth of this energy. The principle is simple. Isolate the destructive interference before it cascades, then reroute power around the node." As she spoke, she produced a small hollow projection from her wrist scanner. 3-dimensional schematics of the ship's power matrix floated between them in translucent blue. She highlighted a minute triangular junction at the heart of the secondary flux bus. "This is the node," she said. "Every attempt so far has been to force the conduits back into alignment, but the field harmonics here are spatially locked. If we can relieve the pressure at that single node, just enough to let the core breathe, then the remainder of the bus will fall back into phase naturally." Councillor the Wreath's bioluminescent circuits dimmed to a deep violet, a sign of intense deliberation. "This approach sidesteps our textbook protocols. It requires improvisation." "Exactly," Elaine replied. "Improvisation guided by physics, not by precedent." Varoken closed his eyes, his form glowing like a dying star. When he opened them again, his light had steadied. "Very well. You will have 4 Ithraxian technicians at your disposal. Take what you need. But know this: if you fail, the Eclipser will remain doomed, and you may not survive the chambers." "Fallout." Elaine gave a curt nod. "Understood, Chancellor. Let's get back to the engine room." As she turned to follow the guard through the towering doors, the council watched in an uneasy hush. In their centuries of explorers, they had never doubted their own, yet here in the silent rift between tradition and necessity, they placed their hope in a human's untested ingenuity. Beyond the chamber, the corridors of the Eclipser hummed with the low thrum of dormant systems. Elaine's steps echoed, each footfall a heartbeat in the ship's long night. The barriers of doubt stood tall, But she had no intention of letting them remain, and somewhere in the ship's deepest circuits, the promise of salvation waited, fragile as a single wire. Elaine stepped into the engine room, where the warp core loomed like a slumbering leviathan. Its braided energy tendrils curled through the room's pylons, each strand glowing with unstable brilliance. 4 Ithraxian technicians, Trax, Virakel, Sother, and Loon gathered around the central junction, their biopatterns flickering with anxious uncertainty. "Here we are," Elaine said, voice steady. She swept a hand over the master console, isolating the secondary flux bus. On the holoprojector, the triangular node pulsed erratically, distorting space-time around it in faint prismatic ripples. Track's 3-fingered hand hovered above the control panel. "If we redirect too much power, the containment field will collapse. Too little, and the phase lock remains broken." Elaine produced her copper alloy wire, now stripped to a gleaming crystalline core. She held it up to the crew's scrutiny. "This conductor can handle extreme flux. Its molecular lattice resists phase shifting under stress. It's simple Earth-grade technology, but it's exactly what we need." Virakel's fingertips traced a pattern in the air. "You would splice this into our quantum matrix?" "Exactly," Elaine replied. "We'll bridge the uneven node, relieve the interference, and let the rest of the bus realign naturally." She crouched before the junction, her tools laid out on a magnetic pad. "But timing is critical. We can't insert the wire while the conduit is live. We'll trigger a feedback surge." Souther keyed a sequence on the console. The warp cores glow dimmed as power sluiced away, isolating the secondary bus. Elaine held her breath, then slid the thin wire into a nanochannel etched into the junction. Sparks flickered as the conductor contacted the oscillating field. "Now," she called, and Turax re-engaged the substation. Energy cascaded back into the bus. The wire flared in brilliant cyan, channeling the terajoules around the broken node. Alarms blared, energy levels soared, but the current held steady. Outside the engine room, the hull vibrated with returning power. The warp nacelles groaned as they spun to life. Inside, Elaine monitored the tricorder. Fluctuation smoothed. The phase differential collapsed from 0.02 exaseconds to 0. She exhaled and withdrew the wire, which glowed faintly before dimming to inert copper. The core's hum deepened, resonating through the entire ship like a heartbeat restored. The Ithraxian technicians exchanged awed silence. Trax placed a glowing hand on Elaine's shoulder. "You have done what no collective engineer could." Elaine smiled, wiping sweat from her brow. "Just a wire and a bit of faith." As they filed out, the Eclipser's engines thrummed with renewed life. Hope had reawakened in the heart of the ship, and with it, the promise of journeys yet to come. The command deck thrummed with renewed vitality. Consoles that had lain dormant now glowed with soft emerald light. Captain Alvin Thurick stood at the helm, eyes wide as the Ithraxian glyphs on his display danced in perfect synchronicity. The warp core's harmonic resonance, once a stuttering heartbeat, now pulsed steadily, a living tribute to Elaine's ingenuity. "All systems report nominal," Virakel announced, her bioluminescent circuits shifting from anxious violet to a proud cerulean. "Warp nacelles are back online. Life support at full capacity. Navigation vectors all clear." A single alarm still blinked on the com panel, a status light indicating a minor phase residue in the secondary conduit. Elaine strode forward, tricorder in hand. With a few expert taps, she adjusted a microfilter in the power matrix. The alarm silenced, and the light steadied to the collective green of operational health. Chancellor Varukan materialized on the main viewer, his stately form framed by the crystalline spires of the High Council chamber. He inclined his head, a gesture steeped in Ithraxian reverence. "Captain Thurick, I observe the Eclipser restored to full function." By what miracle? Not miracle, Chancellor, Alvin interrupted with a broad grin. A human engineer, Commander Elaine Marlowe. He gestured toward her. Elaine dipped her head in acknowledgement, though her cheeks flushed at the sudden spotlight. Varuken's glow pulsed gently, an Ithraxian sign of respect. Your methods transcend our ancient doctrines. You have taught us that hope need not be bound by tradition, but by creativity and courage. Elaine exhaled, the tension of the past cycles melting away. I'm honored, Chancellor, truly, but the real credit goes to the Eclipser's crew for trusting me when everything seemed lost. A ripple of appreciative hums passed through the bridge. Even the staunchest traditionalists among the Ithraxian officers bowed their heads in solemn acknowledgement. Captain Alvin tapped the helm, set course for Alliance Station. We have reports of a new wormhole corridor, an uncharted passage that could have our journey through the outer verge. Elaine leaned against the console, watching the stars stretch into lines as the ship entered warp. Uncharted, she echoed, eyes bright. Just the way I like it. As the swirling vortex of hyperspace enveloped the Eclipser, human and Ithraxian alike felt a surge of exhilaration. Together, they had bridged more than a broken conduit. They had united two cultures in pursuit of the same horizon. And beyond the rippling veil of space-time lay discoveries unimaginable, waiting for those bold enough to seek them.